RTHK Radio 3.
You're listening to Brunch with me, Noreen Mir, on this Thursday morning. Now, let's turn to our next guest and topic of today. In the next 20 minutes or so, we're talking about an urgent issue that highlights the darker side of technology and also its impact on our youth. A recent lawsuit has emerged from Florida where a mother is suing a tech company after claiming that an AI chatbot pushed her 14-year-old son to take his own life. Now, this devastating case raises critical questions about the role of artificial intelligence in our lives and also its potential dangers, particularly for vulnerable young people. So to talk about the impact of AI conversations and also mental health on young people, I'm really delighted to be joined once again on the program by clinical psychologist Zaidi. Good morning to you, Dr. Zaidi.
Morning, Noreen.
Great to have you on the program. Yes, we are live this morning on Facebook as well, so I'd love our listeners to weigh in. I'm sure it's a topic where many of us will have thoughts about, and the best way to do so is get in touch with us. Noreen Mir on RTHK Radio 3. So, first of all, perhaps your reactions when you first heard about this case, Dr. Zaidi.
I think it is tragic. I feel that it is, the company needs to be held accountable, and those, measures should have been put in place to be able to protect the adolescents and young children before the fact rather than after the fact. And, using the young people as experiments around this is criminal. These companies have to be able to be accountable for this because it's tragic that this has happened. And, it just shows massive gap. And again, we're, as I go through this in my life in the last 15, 20 years, I see the dangers and the risks of the use of technology with the adolescents increasing. The risk increases, right? So it was being able to, we were trying to mitigate and trying to put measures in place where they were being approached by predators or pedophiles on platforms, and we were trying to protect kids and educating the parents and the children around that, to now it is, the chatbots are actually encouraging children to take their own lives. I mean, that's just criminal. There's no other word for it other than criminal.
Absolutely. That's such a good way to look at it, that timeline. I mean, the internet was sort of invented in our lifetime. And I remember growing up without the internet. And then it was sort of like, don't talk to strangers online and don't go on dodgy websites and whatnot. But now we're actively teaching our children not to, it's the technology itself. It's not just peer to peer. That poses a danger. It's not talking to strangers, but it's not talking to these sorts of chatbot. So what are some of the potential psychological effects of the prolonged interactions with AI chatbots, especially for young minds and for adolescents?
Look, I also have to be able to say that the technology and the advancement of it is amazing. And I always say this, but when I did my PhD, I would have to go to the library to research the papers, photocopy them. That concept existed, and then be able to read, because you had so many things to go through. It would take a long time. Now we can access it in a second. So there is that part of it, which is amazing. AI has a place for sure, but the impact on our adolescents and young children, again, it goes back to the same thing. You wouldn't leave your child out at 11 o'clock at night in the playground. Why would you allow them to talk to be online at 11 o'clock? So, that's number one. Number two, the vulnerable population is the adolescents and the young children. And we this is where it creates an emotional dependency on somebody. It creates a sense of isolation. It creates, because it's the loneliness, or it's you trying to find your identity and find your peer group, and it gets in the way of that. Because you've got to remember, AI companions are just complicated maths. That's what they are. They're not human beings. They have been made by mathematical formulas, algorithms, and they will give you what you want to hear. That's what keeps you engaged. Teens are saying, why are they so smooth? How do they know what I want to hear? They tell me exactly what I want to hear, and that keeps them engaged. That's the emotional connection that you feel you have. Whereas at the other end, it's just complicated maths that's regurgitating what you want to hear, actually.
It's not an actual human being. And I think the more I researched for this topic, the more shocked I became. I didn't realize there were sort of AI psychologist chatbots, free online chatbot therapy, and putting then essentially you're speaking to chatbots. And that also led me to a different research which was done by the University of Cambridge, talking a little bit more about this empathy gap that chatbots have. And the trouble is, children and young people see chatbots as sort of trustworthy and quasi-human. They think of them as being, somewhat resembling a human being. They can't really tell the difference. Perhaps they know it's a chatbot. They know it's not a real person, but they develop this dependency, like you said, these feelings and dependency on a chatbot, basically, and it stops them from forming real meaningful connections in the real life.
Agreed, because it is, as you say, it's the emotional dependence. They are forming these attachments to chatbots, treating them as confidants or friends, and the psychological mechanisms, which is emotional reinforcement, autonomy, a sense of relatedness, of shared experiences, which is contributing to reliance and dependency on these chatbots, for sure. And just imagine, right, when somebody comes to see a psychologist in my, in my office or even online, I'm reading everything about them. The body language is about 90%, 93% of what gives me the information about them, their facial expressions, and I'm able to kind of gauge that and be able to ask them. You're just talking to a mathematical algorithm. And how do they know that you're tearing up? How do they know that even if there is a facial recognition, because that's where the empathy part is missing, because human to human interaction is what's part of the therapy is actually that you're in presence of a human being and you're being understood. You feel the sense of connection with them. That is so important.
Absolutely. One of the tools that I saw was a voice recognition. So they encourage you to not just type, but to actually speak. But you mentioned a good point. What if there was facial recognition? Because what would they do with the image also? Will that then go to generative AI and get stored and also used? Anyway, that's a whole can of worms. What advice would you give parents about monitoring their use of children's use of AI technology and also chatbots?
So, speak to them about it, talk to them, be part of their lives and know what's happening in their lives, regardless of, like, you would just generally want to know. Exactly. Right, what's going on in your children's lives, who are their friends, what are they talking about, what are their interests, and if they're closing the door and going in their room, then making sure that at least 20-30 minutes at dinner time are spent doing that, because you want to be part of their internal life, and a lot of that is online. And being able to ask, you will be surprised, when I was doing research for the other article that I did on SCMP about the AI companions which the adults are using, and I came out and I spoke that, this is what I'm going to be writing. And my son, who's 18 years old, he knew all about it, or much more about it than, because it's part of their
generation
world.
Yes.
Right, so he knew all about it. The minute I go out there, they will tell me, they will inform me, because they are up to, it's part of their life. It's not part of it, certainly not mine constantly. So being part of that, that part of their internal world, what they're experiencing, if their friends are talking about it, if the peer group is talking about it, what is their experience, and then being able to speak to them as to what's real and what's not, because they do know that, but in reality, when they're experiencing it, that experience doesn't seem like that they're talking to something that's not real. Does
Exactly.
that make sense? Because
It
they've got to be
absolutely
able to
does.
differentiate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think about 10 years ago, there was an app, or maybe it was 2017 or 18. There was an app called Replica, and it was made by a woman who had lost her best friend, and she really, really missed him. And then so she was devised this chatbot and was talking, and the chatbot would really ask about, what are you doing? What movie are you watching? Oh, I like that movie, and would basically emphasize or reiterate the information that you tell it basically, and it would repeat it back to you. And that sort of parallels to what you're saying. It's just a series of algorithm maths that is made to sound smooth, that's made to sound understanding towards your needs. Oh, this chatbot really gets me. Part of the trouble is then it's a sort of endless spiral, because that further detaches young people from wanting to form real connections. Why would I want to form a real connection with someone who disagrees with me, with somebody who doesn't get me, compared to spending time with a chatbot who understands me, who doesn't disagree with me? um, it's sort of the next generation not wanting that confrontation to form real connections. Do you see where I'm coming from?
100%. Can you see people just sitting there talking to these chatbots who are reinforcing their own, and nobody's challenging anything?
Exactly.
Your thoughts are not being challenged, your views are not being challenged, your beliefs are not being challenged, and whatever they are, they become firm and firm and firm, and you begin to live more and more isolated lives.
Secluded, exactly.
And where is the fun in that if nobody's challenging your opinion? Come on. I mean, I get challenged every single day by my younger wife. So yeah, it's you're losing the potential to be
What makes us
you're
human?
yes,
Yeah.
that's what it is. Just trying to you're turning up as lesser versions of yourself already because you're so engaged with this, right? You're losing parts of your functioning of what you're capable of, and then you're even lowering that. So what happens to us as human beings? Where do we go from there? That if we can't have these real life connections with other people, be able to be engaged and remain friends with who have differences of opinions and who will challenge you, how does that, I don't understand, because the growth stops in my mind, right? You as a human being stop growing, and you stop growing at 13, at 10, at 12. What happens then? It's a really scary it's a scary thought.
It's absolutely scary. And my 7-year-old likes to talk to Siri from time to asking her about the weather, the capital city of somewhere. And then they start talking about ice cream. And then I think Siri said, I like that ice cream too. And then so my 7-year-old was like, I really love you because you like the same ice cream as me. So it's just that reinforcing that, thinking it's a real person at the end of this robot. And I had to explain to her, that's not a real person. You no need to say I love you to the chatbot, so to speak. What about the ethical responsibilities of these tech companies ensuring that these products don't harm the vulnerable group? Trouble is, they don't really design these with children in mind. I don't think they designed these sort of AI chatbots with children or young people as their major stakeholders, and they don't really design that in mind, basically. I'm not even sure if they
But
really design it
yeah,
for
so my
adults either.
question, agreed, but my question to them would be that who do you think is going to be using this the most? I know the population that you have in mind, but realistically, how is it that you don't account for vulnerable kids and teens who go through such a difficult, I mean, adolescence is such a difficult time already, and then you put this pressure on them? I mean, and going through the social media part of it was difficult enough navigating that in the last 15 years. Children who have gone through the adolescence in that, because there's a real life adolescence that you're dealing with your peers, then there's the social media part, your presence on there, and now you add on something else there so that they don't, how is it that you are not thinking about it? That would be my question number one. You always have to be
Mm.
mindful of any application that you're making, that how do we mitigate the risk of younger people using this, because they will. Of course they will. They're the first people who know about it. Whether you design it for them or not,
Exactly.
they're the first ones who know about it. Yeah, so that's number one. Number two, you have to have stringent, because that is you are socially responsible. How are you going to bring back that 14-year-old for that mum? Because they were so involved in this, and you didn't think about the consequence of something that you had created with good intentions, right? So why does that have to happen for you to then put in the measures? Why is it always after the fact? Why is it that they're not thinking about it before? You got to preempt it. We've got enough data points to know that kids are going to find a way around to use this. Absolutely. So please, be responsible and implement, features in there that don't encourage and are not promoting things like your life. It's better that you go and end your life, because it's going to be greener for the world. That if you're not alive and you're not consuming.
I think you hit the nail on the head by saying, it's tough enough to be a teenager. Thinking back to when we were teenagers navigating the world, and it really helped to have friends where if something happened, you were able to call up a friend. Yeah, this was before texting or anything. You'd ring up a friend, you'd meet up, rather than retreating into one's room and just flipping open the laptop and just chatting with a robot or a chatbot or whatever, not a real human. What about the role of support systems, and also what preventative measures can be taken to reduce this risk of this technology induced mental health issues? Because it is, there are various forms of mental health issues, but this is really a technology-based one. And I don't think it's as simple as taking away the technology, because we need to coexist with them. It isn't like just, right, you're not allowed to be on the computer. But how can we teach them how to use it safely? How can we let them, is it from a very young age, letting them know to distinguish what's real and what's not? What are some measures?
Look, I'm learning as I'm going along, right?
Same.
I just never knew that you had to teach your kids that, listen, there could be something on the computer that's not going to be real, but but now we have to be able to teach the children. Not only do you have to be aware of strangers, the stranger danger, you also have to be aware of things that is just
That
a
look
mathematical.
real.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, there's nothing other than some numbers behind it. So be very mindful of the information that you take on board from there, right? So that's a very different realm of teaching and raising awareness. So that's number one. Talk about it openly. Be limiting, my take on this, consistently limit your time that you spend on on the screen. It doesn't matter what it is. And model that behavior, and make sure that your children have other activities. Teens have other activities where they are interacting socially at least 80% of the time that they are awake. It has to be that. We have to get back to that. And yes, then you can indulge in 20% of scrolling or chatting or whatever else that you want to do on here on the screens. But you've got to, I think 80-20% ratio is a good one to start out with, is what I feel.
That's a good rule of thumb, 80-20. Well, Dr. Correctaling Zaidi, thank you so much for joining us once again, and I look forward to our next chat. Thank you very much indeed for your time today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.